We all are only 1 degree removed from knowing someone who is being impacted by workplace violence or some form of online exploitation. This issue filters into employee wellness, impacting engagement at work. Let's bridge this gap by bringing awareness and education to these pressing issues and shield the vulnerable.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to Shield the Vulnerable, Untold Stories. Today's guest is Mary Jo Ross. And Mary Jo is an advocate for survivors of child sexual abuse and child sex trafficking victims. She's the author of 2 books. She's an educator. But more importantly, Mary Jo, you are a lived experience expert with a truly inspirational story and message behind it. So welcome and thank you for being a guest with us here today.
Thank you, Dave. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So Mary Jo, when you and I first met, you told me something really interesting. And it was that you're not a victim, you're not a survivor, that you are a thriver. But you were trafficked as a child through what is called familial trafficking, which is being trafficked by another family member. And as an adult, you turned to a very certain alcoholism, but it wasn't alcohol, it was workaholism. You became a workaholic. And that's really what we're going to focus on today is that topic. But Mary Jo, do you mind sharing a little bit of background or context for our listeners so they understand your story, where you came from, and what's led you to doing what you're doing today and where you're at today?
I'd be happy to. I was born in, well, I would say I've been through severe trauma,
Mm-hmm.
is a quick way of saying it. I was born into a family there was alcoholism, there's mental illness, there's violence. Um, I was first sexually abused when I was an infant. Not that I remember those specific things, but I saw it happen to my younger siblings. Um, And the first time I was sex trafficked was by my grandfather when I was 5 years old. And so the trafficking could be for him, it was to be able to move up a couple levels in an organization he participated in. He took me and shared me for that. Other times I was sold by my mom because there were 7 of us living at home and my parents weren't bringing in income. And so um, starting 6th, 7th grade, I got taken certain places on weekends and I earned the grocery money.
Wow.
And I thought that that was just part of being the family, that
Right.
somebody had to provide the food. That's
So
pretty
you
rough
started to
when you're
see
12
this
years
as
old.
normal, and it was how you contributed to the family dynamics.
Right, all the different things that happened because my traffickers were my mom, dad, older sister, and grandfather. And they trafficked me many times between the ages of 5 and 17.
Wow.
But for
Wow.
money, for drugs, for, like I said, favors, for other things.
Yeah. And so as you grew, this was something that you really suppressed through early adulthood. You didn't talk about it. And it took you the last several years to find your voice. And I think found it you have because now you're kind of screaming it from a mountaintop as an advocate for those who have experienced the same thing. So what happened in your life that brought that out where you said, I can't hold this in anymore and I have to talk about it? Because I mean, I've heard so many stories from individuals who later on in adulthood that they come out about trauma that's happened in their life. And it seems to be such a freeing thing for them and watching them use their story to help others.
Oh, it is a wonderful thing now to look back and say, and I always think of it as doesn't matter what the trauma you went through, it is possible to not only go from victim to survivor to thriver, but I have a very good life now. I have a family, I have close friends. Um, I go speak, I go do different things that I would never have done before.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it all started back when I was in school because school was very easy for me, and it was basically the only safe place I had. And so, even though I was bullied, even though I really didn't have friends or anything, I had school and I was safe,
Mm-hmm.
physically safe. And so that is where I put my focus.
I want to ask something about that because we have kind of two contexts here. We have one where you say, I thought that's what I had to do for my family.
Right.
I thought that's the way I contributed. But also at the same time, while you're having that feeling, you're also knowing that school is your safe place. That has to be a tug of war in your mind, going back and forth about what here? What's
Right.
right,
Well, with earning grocery money, I just thought that was just how every family is.
right.
I didn't know any different. And it wasn't
Yeah.
until about 3 years ago that I ever knew that there was a name for that, that it's familial sex trafficking.
And
I
so
had no
everything,
idea
go ahead.
because I didn't identify as a victim.
Right. And so everything that you're doing now, all of your advocacy work, this is all come out in the last 3 years. Your books, your speaking, the amount of growth that you've done. That is amazing. So what happened? What brought it out? I know, so you identified as a workaholic
Yes.
in your whole adult life. And where at what time like did you link that, hey, I'm a workaholic and I'm going to, I know that that's attributed to the trauma that you faced and where you've said, I need to start being a voice for this.
Actually, it took me a very long time to figure that out
Yeah.
because, like I mentioned, school was safe. And so I knew the only way to escape my family environment was to get scholarships and go away to college,
Okay.
which is what I did. But so that was always a focus. I put myself through University of Denver in 3 years, only taking one summer class, taking 19 to 22 hours a trimester. And and then I crashed and burned. I graduated in 3 years and then crashed and burned for 6 months. But I see that workaholism then.
Yeah.
And then uh, when I was, okay, I graduated when I was 20, had my first son when I was 22. And somewhere late toward the time I was 23, I started having memories of what had happened in flashbacks. Remember, because it was pretty much a blank. I mean, I knew like the drinking and the violence and all that kind of stuff, but the other stuff started coming back, some of the things
Mm-hmm.
that had happened to me. And so I decided that my children were never going to experience anything that I had. So I sought help, and it took a number of people before anybody would believe me. I called, I worked up the nerve. And part of it was because there was an old lady across the street that was miserable, bitter woman. Of course, she knew everybody's business, but she had no friends. She had no life. And it was kind of things were coming back, and it's like, I could turn out like her.
Right.
And so that was motivation. But I tried to get, when I called to get an appointment because I needed help, I wanted help. Um, the nurse, well, the receptionist, put me on hold. The nurse came on. Who are you? What do you want? And I said, I'd been sexually abused and I need help. I need a referral for a therapist. And she made me feel like I should never have said those words, very
Really?
shaming. And instead of getting into the see my doctor in 2 or 3 days, she made me wait 3 weeks.
Really?
Yes.
What prompts that?
Well, maybe she had her own issues.
Right.
I don't know. But then I get in there to see my regular family doctor. And they put me in his office, and I don't know why. It wasn't a regular patient room, but came in the door, put my file down. I was sitting like in this position. There were a wall of windows across from me. The doctor came in and walked in front of those windows, never looking at me, asking me, "So why are you here?" I said, "I've been sexually abused. I need a referral. I need help." And then he wanted specifics, poke, poke, poke. And it happened once or twice. And he was not safe. His back was toward me. And so I couldn't tell him what he wanted to hear. And so he turned around and he said, "You're lying. You're making it up. I don't believe you." But after waiting 3 weeks to get in, he realized that I was not leaving that room without a referral. And so
Good for
finally he
you.
said, "Well, I know a female psychiatrist. Could I refer you to her?" I was like, "Sure, anybody. I want help." And so before I left, made an appointment for 2 weeks later. I lived in Kansas at the time, so uh, it was like 23 miles to her office. I go into there, and if you've ever been to a psychiatrist, for me, it's usually an hour is the first appointment, and then you go in for 15-minute checks. Well, I got in there, and she's like almost angry. She was asking the same thing, "So why are you here?" Only she was looking at me when I was talking, and well, since you can't tell me something specific, you are lying, you're making it up for attention, and you're wasting my time. 10 minutes after I sat in her office, she was escorting me out.
Really?
I just wanted help. And so obviously I was devastated, and I had to pull over several times driving back to town because I was crying so hard. So I ventured into the local mental health center, which was on the main drag, so everybody could see who was coming and going from there. But I went in there and I was in crisis, so they had a therapist. She calmed me down and we talked for a little bit. And I said, "I really need a referral. Who can I see? I need help." And she said, "Well, two doctors said it never happened, so I can't do anything for you." But she eventually dug out that there was a 12-week adult children of alcoholics group starting the following week.
Hmm.
And I said, "I'll take it." Well, I mean, that was that much of the problem, but I would take anything. And so I ended up doing that 12 weeks, got to know the social worker who ran it, and he was able to connect me with a therapist who could understand my issues and was familiar with them. And we did an introduction over the phone. She didn't grill me like they did. And it was just a whole different experience. So I did eventually get help, but I had to be stubborn. And I
And
think part of, I
this
mean,
was when you're in
God
your
was
early 20s, right?
right, early 20s.
Okay.
And I mean, I had always had God, but um, I think my mama bear is what kept me going
Hmm.
because I ended up having another son. And it wasn't for them, I don't think I would have fought so hard to deal with all the hard stuff for a long period of time.
Yeah. And so, I mean, you almost have this sense of re-victimization through
Hmm.
people, professionals that you should be able to turn to say that I need help and that they don't
Right.
believe you. Does that then contribute to, your through university, you're a workaholic. You put yourself through the University of Denver in 3 years. Does that continue into adulthood, being that workaholic, the same thing that you were
Yes.
turning to?
Yes. So I spent some years in therapy in and out along the way. But and I was on disability at one point because that was the only way I could get therapy and medication and the things I needed. However, when I went back to work, um, I think I was okay for a little while, but then I started, I had to be an overachiever, and I got a lot of kudos and stuff from working really hard and, you know, getting promotions and just there's external validation that I didn't have. I didn't have it internally. And so that was part of, the praise and, oh, you're doing this and oh, so wonderful. But eventually it turned into, you know, I couldn't turn off my brain. It was 24/7. And I had done some different things. I worked in nonprofits for a while. And for a period of about 14 years, I was executive director of 6 different state professional associations, all at the same
Okay.
time. So I had 6 boards of directors. And then 10 years of that, I owned a business managing those. And people would say, I don't know how you can handle all this. How do you do that? And I said, I don't know. I just do. But I was juggling. And I hit a point about my 10th year in business where I was really burnt out. I'd say
Mm-hmm.
the bacon was very crispy.
Yeah.
But it was hard to get up in the morning. It was hard, to lead my staff, all that. And I went to a retreat and they said, you need vacation time, you need spa time, and you need to sit down and look at where you are and where you want to go.
Yeah.
So that hit me pretty hard. And what I ended up doing very painfully was deciding to close my business down because I had the brilliant idea, I've started this business, I've done this for 10 years, even though I'd never had a business class in my life. So the business ran me, not the other way around. I didn't know how to prepare, but I thought,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I'll sell my business. And I got laughed at. It was too dependent on me. And so
Right.
I had to close it down. So, I gave 90 days notice and I didn't want my nonprofit associations to just go because there's one competitor at the time and I didn't think they were very good. And so I helped create an oncology division with another association management company and helped oversee that. And I started consulting as my business was going down.
Mm-hmm.
But I also, after all that wrapped up, it took a few months. I crashed and burned. I
Is
had a lot of physical pain. For about 15 months, I had hip issues and this and that, and tried all the treatments, and but they could never figure what it was. Well, I know now I can look back and say, hey, that's a result of all the trauma that I'd kept
yeah.
inside because the
Yeah.
body keeps the score.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's a great book, right? It's The Body Keeps the Score,
It is.
about for understanding the impacts of trauma on your life. And so let's the workaholic,
Hmm.
the Mary Jo that was a workaholic, is that done? Because if it's in your mind, the busier I am, the harder I go, I can ignore the rest. I don't have to think about it. It can't take up headspace because I'm so busy and focused. Is that where becoming a workaholic comes from?
I think so. It's a way to avoid feelings, but it just, it progressed
Mm-hmm.
as I went on. And when I
But
was
then
having
once you
these
don't have that,
revelations,
when you
pardon?
don't have that work to focus on, that the trauma starts to come out.
Right. And so keep busy. So I kept doing more and more. And after I had gone to that retreat, I looked back and I had traveled 26 weekends a year, 3 years in a row.
Okay.
So I was really fighting and trying
Right.
to avoid it.
So is this where you have a book? Can
Hmm.
my business survive my vacation?
Yes.
Is that where that book was born from? Because you have another book that Stop the Silence, Thriving After Childhood Sexual Abuse.
Yes.
But you have this other book, Can My Business Survive My Vacation? Is that where that book title came from? Because you go to try to sell a business and all of a sudden it's like, I am the business. Without me, there is no business. Is that,
And
but
so
I
I
think you had
didn't,
told me that these books were both kind of born from the same place.
right, the trauma and then the business part. And after I crashed and burned, I went back and became a small business transformation coach
Okay.
because I wanted to learn the things I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
And so my goal was to help other small business owners avoid my mistakes.
Got you.
And so part of the book came out because of that, because it was time to do that. And I wanted to give back. And It was just a little workbook and with checklist and just all the basics that I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
And
All
that
the
way it
things you
wasn't
wish
just,
you
you know,
did
a few
know.
clients. Pardon?
And all the things you wish you did know.
Right. And just in a simple format, and, you know, hopefully it helps a lot of people.
Good for you.
Gotten some
Is
good
the
feedback.
book about like teaching for female entrepreneurs, like how to work on their business, but not necessarily in their business?
Well, that's part of it. But basically, it starts with just all the basics that you need to do
Mm-hmm.
when you go into business. You know, all the structure, the processes, you know, everything you set up, all the financials, just all the building blocks that you need
Mm-hmm.
before you start a business. Or a lot of people, small business owner, you know, come in and do them afterward. But all the basics that you need, and then it goes on to give examples. But the book came about because I was having problems. I was trying to do stuff about being able to sell your business later in life. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you know, different kinds of planning, emergency planning, those kinds of planning. And I was having a hard time getting a lot of buy-in. And so a publisher who's in my mastermind group said, "Hey, what about can my business survive my vacation?" and asked me to write the book with him.
I love it.
And so that was a lot of fun. But it just, yes, because if you build all the blocks and you do the things you need to do in 3 years, 5 years, you can sell that business. It
Mm-hmm.
has everything in place.
That's right. That's right. So what are you doing now? You're an advocate for
Hmm.
child sexual abuse survivors, victims
Hmm.
of childhood sexual trafficking. Like, what does this look like? I know you're speaking. What is it that you're doing?
Well, I said well, 3 years ago, I was able to tell my whole story for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's then I got my calling because I was doing the coaching or the consulting, that kind of stuff, but my heart wasn't in it. I had been
Right.
shooting myself, thinking
Yep.
I
Shooting all
have
over
this
yourself. I
expertise, I
should do
need,
this.
yes, to do that. And I realized that I'm called to share my story, to show that it is possible to go from what I call my 17 years of hell to having a great life now, um, to speaking up for those who can't speak up for themselves. Like when I speak, a lot of times people say, you know, they're 70, 80 years old and they've never told a single person.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's giving people permission to tell their stories. But I do education along with it. It's just not all the stories of what happened to me. So I'm doing other podcasts. I'm really involved with the Oklahoma Coalition Against Human Trafficking.
Amazing.
And so I'm on the conference planning committee, but I'm also on the policy. And so get to help with legislation and those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a heart for that. And I helped pass 7 state laws for oncology when I was in that business.
Good for you.
So
And
I
you take
love
all of
doing
that
that kind of thing.
experience and now you can
Right. And
transform it
so,
into what you're
yes.
doing now.
So I'm just learning and participating and doing everything I can to learn, but it's also kind of nice because I don't have to answer to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And so once I no longer had clients, I could say what I wanted to say.
That's right.
So I'm pretty vocal on LinkedIn saying how I feel because I don't have somebody say, you
You
can't
got
say
nothing
that.
to
That
lose.
ruins our image.
Right. Right. One thing I want to touch on here, because I know how much you are an advocate for people to be able to come forward with their stories and how helping that can be to the individual soul to not have to harbor this in here. But you also talked about such a terrible experience in your early 20s trying to get that story out with right from that first call to the nurse, to the doctor's office, to talking to a therapist at the mental health center, all people who should be able to help you. And I don't want our listeners to hold in and say, That's exactly what I don't tell anybody. Nobody's going to believe me, or this is going to happen and it's going to re-victimize me, right? And I don't know. I would hope today, I mean, that was some time ago that you went and
Right.
did that. And I would hope today with trauma-informed care and resources and mental health that people would never get that approach. But for anybody
Well, and I
who
think
is
that was almost 40 years ago.
right,
So attitudes have changed
big
considerably.
time, big time.
Yes.
And that's what I want to get out about this is that
Mm-hmm.
for anybody holding this in, that's not the norm. That's not the response that anybody should have. And I don't want
Correct.
anybody who has their own story of victimization to live in a state where they can't ever thrive.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what would be your biggest piece of advice for somebody who might hear this and say, I know that I was harmed as a child or as an adult. I have this trauma. Where do I begin? Where do I start?
What would
For
I
any,
recommend?
yeah, for anybody who has been through this, what
Mm-hmm.
would you recommend to them? Where do they begin? Where do they start? Where do they turn to?
Well, there are a lot of things they can do. Um, there's a lot of support groups. There are a lot of organizations that help, nonprofits, and do that kind of thing. So if they're closer to what was going on, because my stuff happened way back.
Mm-hmm.
But if newer, there's victim service providers that provide services. They provide counseling. They can help you with housing. They can do all those kinds of things. There's also therapists who can help, but not every therapist is trained to do that. And so it's important if someone looks for a therapist that they feel comfortable with them, do some research. And if that's not a good fit, don't stay because you
Right.
have that right. And so one thing that's really important for me and something I recommend is with survivors or supporting survivors is giving them options.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're being controlled, when you're being trafficked, when you're being abused, you have no choice. And so even, a couple different options. And so there are different options. They can reach out to me and I can help. I may not be able to find the accurate person, but I can help point them
You
different
can help guide it.
directions.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So with that said then, where can people find you at?
At my website, maryjoross.com. And
Ross.com.
also, I'm very active on LinkedIn, Mary Jo Ross. Some on
Amazing.
Facebook, but mostly LinkedIn.
Mostly on LinkedIn. So maryjoross.com or Mary Jo Ross on LinkedIn for that.
Yes.
Amazing. Amazing. Mary Jo, thank you so much for showing your vulnerability, but really demonstrating why it is that you're a thriver today and sharing your story. I know it's been a long journey for you in your life, but you now are doing such amazing work. And for anybody, any of those who are listening, whether it's yourself or somebody that you know who may be holding on to such a story, to be there for them and to support and let them know that they can become a thriver, that they don't
Hmm.
just have to be a survivor, that they aren't a victim, that they can be a thriver and you can lead a life. And I know it's such a difficult thing to point out that, you know what, these are things that didn't happen to you, they happened for you, and that you can turn that story in life around and have a huge impact on anybody else in their life. Your voice matters. And your voice, when you come out, empowers others who are going through the same thing to do that. So, Mary Jo, thank you so much for sharing that story and
You're
really contributing
welcome.
about how you became a workaholic in the progress in the process because you've
Hmm.
done a lot of great things even
Hmm.
prior to you actually coming forward and saying, look, this is what's happened to me. And you used all of that and it's led you to where you are today, which is truly in an amazing and beautiful place. And thank you so much for being an advocate for all the work that you
Thank
do.
you.
Excellent.
And I do want to say it's important that um, survivors, victims, whoever knows that it was never their fault.
Absolutely.
That
That
was
is
somebody
huge.
else. And also somebody in law enforcement when I was 24 was the first person ever to say, "I believe you." And that
It's
made
amazing.
such an impact. He's still my hero. We still keep in touch. And so those words are very important
That's got
when someone
goosebumps. It
shares.
is. It is. Those are such
Mhm.
important words. And as you said, right, that and this is part of whether it's trafficking, sexual abuse, that the abuser will make you feel as though you are the reason for this happening. And you have to know that it is not your fault. It didn't happen because of you. So um, MaryJoRoss.com is where you can find her. Mary Jo Ross on LinkedIn. This has been another amazing episode of Shield the Vulnerable, Untold Stories. Mary Jo, thank you again for being here.
Thank you, Dave.